Three things. Addiction is created by repression, addiction is driven by repression, and addiction is sustained by repression. Here's the mechanics of all three. When kids push down certain emotions in childhood in order to stay safe and get love from their unconscious caregivers, they're forced to sort of split and live as half of themselves. And this is basically the birth of the ego or the false self, because when I'm holding down or holding back what's true, I'm forced to identify with what's false. And this might work for a little while, but eventually it becomes really painful to live like this as half a person or as a false self. And when the pain gets bad enough and we find just the right drug of choice to soothe that pain, that's when the addictive or compulsive impulse really starts to ramp up. So that's how repression creates addiction. Now remember, there's still repressed, buried emotions in the body from childhood. And as long as they stay there, they will drive the cycle of addiction. The same compulsions will keep happening over and over again because the need to soothe ourselves because of the repressed and buried emotions in the body, it doesn't just go away. Really interesting side note here. I've worked with a lot of people to resolve their addiction by resolving their repression. And the nature of their drug of choice, it's largely dependent on what emotions they repress. So if someone represses really big energies like anger or power or sexuality, then their ego or false self manifests as, calm, peaceful, timid, small, people-pleasing, right? And their drug of choice reflects that. It's usually downers or depressants like THC or heroin, things that make it easier for them to be calm and peaceful and show up as that kind of false self. And of course, the reverse is true for those who repress more vulnerable emotions like hurt or sadness. The false self and the drug of choice reflect the need to show up as strong or tough or in control, right? So uppers, cocaine, speed, yeah? And so when people come into the repression work, the drug of choice can be a great indicator as to what it is that they primarily repress, which of course is key to know when you're coming out of repression. And lastly, how does repression sustain addiction? Well, our drug of choice makes it easier for us to pretend and live as that false self for longer periods of time. And what are we pretending? That we don't have repressed emotions in our body when we actually do. And so when the pain of staying in repression and pretense outweighs the fear of coming out of repression and pretense, that's when people hit rock bottom, and that's when people come into this work. Resolve emotional repression and you will resolve addiction. And that doesn't necessarily mean you'll stop using your drug of choice. It means you won't need to addictively use it anymore because you've cleared the body of what drove the need to soothe and pretend, buried repressed emotions. Learn more about this, or if you're at rock bottom, start your process at repressiontest.com.